Well, the topic was music and art. We asked our 7th grader what the primary colors were, and she gave us something about music. Not quite correct, but that's alright. Moving on, the 9th grader answered about the Colosseum. It's a famous structure over in Rome that was used for gladiator fights. That is correct. Lastly, upon further review, our 11th grader did remember that Hush Little Baby was the song, Hush Little Baby, Don't Say a Word. So we'll give her that point, because afterwards she did remember it. Although, the phrase doesn't seem to ring a bell in common culture, so it's not something that we can express quite freely. Moving on. Alright, our next section is on the Bible. Even though there are many people who aren't Christian in America, a lot of things in the Bible are emphasis for things in our culture. For example, in literature, we find that the term Christ figure is meant for someone who gives up their life for their people, just like Jesus Christ. So let's ask our 3 students about the Bible. Now, before we go on, let's note that these are all Christian kids, so let's see how they do on this section.
Thanks.
Starting with the 7th grader, who just came back from confirmation tonight.
You should do well.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the 3 magi are?
No.
Alright, moving on to the 9th grader. 9th grader, can you tell us about the parting of the Red Sea?
Where Moses was trying to, and his people were trying to escape from Egypt, and he parted the Red Sea to get away from the soldiers.
Alright, moving on, last one.
You like him best.
The 11th grader, can you tell us a little bit about the golden calf?
It's about a cow.
Very good, moving on. Alright, so we talked about the Bible, and we gave them 3 cultural icons from the Bible. First, we had the 3 magi. Those were the 3 wise men. It's almost Christmas time. Magi was another word for a king, a rich person, or someone who studied back in the day. A very smart person. They were called magi. The kings were not only kings, they were also these very smart philosophers. Moving on, the 9th grader did get the question about the parting of the Red Sea being done by Moses so his people could flee Egypt. And lastly, the 11th grader did miss the question on the golden calf. The golden calf was the idol that the Jews worshipped after they escaped from Egypt, falsely so. Let's move on to our next subject. Alright, our second to last topic is early American history. Now, like I said earlier, Hirsch doesn't find that recent American history is that important to culture, but the stuff that made a lasting impact hundreds of years ago is what's important. This history in particular comes from pre-1865. Let's start with the 7th grader. 7th grader, can you tell us why the year 1776 was important?
Wasn't it when the colonial people came to America?
Alright, next question. 9th grader, can you tell us what the Underground Railroad was?
It was not a railroad, it was a secret path for Harriet Tubman to lead the slaves to freedom.
Harriet Tubman owned slaves?
No, she escaped with slaves by other owners.
Alright, going on. 11th grader, who was Frederick Douglass?
He's this guy who was a slave, and he eventually escaped, and he wrote about his life.
Alright, let's see. American history, pre-1865. We asked the 7th grader about the year 1776, why it was important. We would have taken anything from the signing of the Declaration to Independence to America's birthday. She didn't get that. Moving on to the 9th grader, we asked him about the Underground Railroad. He got that right. It was the path that specifically Harriet Tubman used to help slaves escape, although a lot of slaves used it. It wasn't a railroad like he said, it was actually just a path of houses. Lastly, we had Frederick Douglass, who the 11th grader did get correct, was a slave that became a famous author in the North. Last topic. Alright, our last topic of study tonight, history post-1865. And when I say post, I don't mean the 80s when the book was written, and definitely not now, present day. This is stuff, again, that Hirsch thought was important from our history. Not all of it's quite recent, but let's see how they do. 7th grader, can you tell us about Jim Crow laws? What were they? What did they do?
I don't know.
Alright, moving on to the 9th grader. 9th grader, can you tell us about Henry Ford? What did he do?
I don't know.
Alright, moving on to the 11th grader. 11th grader, can you tell us a little bit about Watergate? What was it?
That was a scandal by the President Nixon.
Anything else?
No.
Alrighty. Let's see how they did on this last topic. History, post-1865. We asked the 7th grader about Jim Crow laws. These were the laws developed during the Civil Rights Movement to help keep blacks from experiencing the same rights as white people. 7th grader didn't get that one. Go on to the 9th grader, and we asked him about Henry Ford. Now, we were hoping for at least something about cars. But specifically, Henry Ford was the person who invented the assembly line, which helped speed up the process. And lastly, we asked the 11th grader about Watergate scandal. She did say it was a scandal, but that's about it. So,
I said Nixon.
Oh, she also mentioned Nixon, I'm sorry. Alright, but however, this was the only scandal that led to a president resigning. So, it was pretty good. We were also looking for that, but not bad. Anyway, let's go back into my room and talk a little bit. Alright, so let's talk about how they did. What we showed you on this video is actually only a handful of the questions we asked. We asked 10 questions from each of the categories you saw, leading for about 80 questions for each student. These topics were randomly selected from Hirsch's and other cultural literasts' theories about what students should know before the age of 6th grade. Let's talk about the 7th grader first. Out of the 80 questions we asked her, she was only able to give 15 fully correct answers among the 8 categories, and besides those 15 questions, she was only able to offer details in about another 10. Less than, a little bit more than a quarter if you count the detailed questions. Talk about the 9th grader. Out of the 80 questions we asked him, he was only able to answer about 18 of the questions, and only gave about details on about another 10 of them, just like the 7th grader, leaving him with about a score of 28. The 11th grader did do a little bit better. She was able to answer about 32 of the questions, and gave details on another 15 of them, bringing her score to about a 47. More than half, but still nowhere near a passing grade on a rubric in school. Now, why do cultural literacy theorists believe that this is proof that our education system is failing? Well, Hirsch and these other theorists have an idea that the more you know, the more you're capable of learning. For example, when you're in elementary school, the first thing you learn about math is addition. And from there, you can learn algebra. And from there, you can learn calculus. If you didn't know addition in the first place, you couldn't learn calculus. Thus, if a student doesn't know what the phrase, a gift horse in the mouth means, they wouldn't be able to read certain literary works. And if they can't read those certain literary works, they're not going to understand our culture. They're not going to understand these ideas expressed by these authors. So, you decide, does that mean our culture is dead? Now, here's what I'm going to argue. Hirsch has proved his point. Obviously, what is deemed acceptable for 6th graders isn't well known nowadays. Whether it was well known back in the 80s when this book was written, we'd have to time travel or look at a former study to decide. However, I'm going to propose a new idea. That the cultural idea that we need to know about Oedipus and Greek gods and minor stories from the Bible like Lot, I'm going to push those ideas out the window. Below, you'll see links to several videos. Each of these videos are students among varying ages reacting to what I propose is a new type of culture. Click on them and check them out. You guys tell me if you think that these are good examples of our new type of cultural literacy. We'll find out. Check a few of them out and then come back to here and watch the rest of my video because I got a few things I want to wrap up. Go ahead, check them out. So, what you just watched, if you did click on the videos, and you should, because the teacher will know if you didn't watch them. What you just watched are several video experiments done by a YouTube phenomenon extremist called the Fine Brothers. What these experimenters did is they showed several viral videos to students between the ages of 5 and 13 and saw what their reactions were. Now, why did I show you these links? Because I'm suggesting that YouTube is one of the new things that in 20, 30, who knows how many years will be considered part of all cultural literacy. Who knows? If I told you what Chocolate Rain was, would you already know? Or if I mentioned Chris Crocker, Leave Britney Alone, would you have an idea of what I meant by that? These are just several examples of what could become part of our cultural literacy in the future. Obviously, the kids all had different reactions to them. Some of them knew the videos, some of them didn't. And the ones who didn't all had their own interpretation of them. But remember, even the 13-year-olds, which was the oldest age group, were only a year above the 6th graders. So, they're not yet culturally literate. However, students my own age, or maybe even adults, are aware of these cultural phenomena like YouTube videos, and I'd say they're probably more aware of the YouTube videos than they are of some of the questions I asked the 7th, 9th, and 11th grader. So, What am I trying to say? I'm not saying the Civil War shouldn't be known, and I'm not saying that the stories from the Bible shouldn't be referenced in literature. I'm not saying you shouldn't read all those books you mentioned before. They're all great works of literature, and they all have something to offer. What I am saying is this. Cultural literacy is constantly growing, constantly changing. Just because we didn't know the same thing we knew yesterday does not mean that we're any stupider. Now, well, that's arguable, isn't it? I'm not going to use that phrase. It means that we know different things. Not less, not more, but different. Alright? 30, 40 years ago, knowing how to use a typewriter was important. I think we can all argue nowadays that isn't important. Does that mean we're any stupider because we know a little bit less about typewriters, something that was once a prominent part of cultural literacy? No, it doesn't. It just means we know something different. Culture is constantly growing and changing and adapting. We don't wear the same clothes that our pilgrim ancestors wore when they first came over the Mayflower. We wear different things. And in 30 years, we'll wear totally different things as well. Especially if you watch Back to the Future, you'll see they wear pretty weird things. That's my point. Culture is constantly changing, so why shouldn't our cultural literacy? So, next time you read a book by Hirsch or any cultural theorists, don't think that we're stupid, our education system is failing. If it's failing, it's not because we don't know things like Oedipus and Antigone. It's because of our teachers. It's because of our education system, because of money, not because of what we consider culturally prominent. We're constantly growing and changing. So, ask yourself, what do you know about cultural literacy?